SmartQA Musings, which is a gentle flurry of interesting thoughts. And today's thoughts are on accelerating QA improvement. I think it's a fairly, possibly a stage subject, also possibly an interesting subject, and probably will take some look at what does it take and what does it mean, what does it take, and so on. We often think of QA improvement possibly as speeding up by automation or doing test process improvement. More recently, I encountered a customer who was wanting to do test process improvement and automation, and that's what he thought he wanted. The question here is that good enough? And that's what we're going to talk about and dwell on in the next maybe 20 odd minutes or 15, 20 odd minutes. Let's take a simple view of asking a question in terms of what does improvement mean? Probably means different things to different people. But if I were to simplify it, it probably means this, that we want to be consistent, whether I do things or you do things or somebody else things in the context of QA. Since we're talking about QA improvement, we want certain degree of consistency, some orderliness. Second, we want to be speedy. We want to be efficient in how we do things. Certainly, we want the activities that are done to be effective, that is good. And then, of course, we want to be able to respond rapidly to changes that occur during the course of the product or application development, to be agile. And of course, lastly, as a manager, I would be interested in ensuring that it can scale to larger projects, bigger teams, different technologies, and so on. So in essence, improvement could be seen from these angles of consistency, efficiency, effectiveness, responsiveness, and scalability. Now, to be able to accomplish this, the next question then is, what are the means to doing this improvement? Certainly the one that comes across in the top of the mind is process. Improve the organizational process. Why? Because we think we need to be more consistent, more disciplined, more orderly, more planned, and therefore that's a natural means of improvement. But is it all? Is the question. To dwell upon it deeply, maybe it's not sufficient for us to deal only at an organization level in the context of a process. It is also of enhancing the individual practice, the way each one of us do things, the way the various activities that is defined by the process is actually done at the individual practice. And finally, of course, be it the process-related activities which are done by the individuals, we certainly want to exploit technology, tools, and as we will see later, maybe also aids to do the job better, faster, and so on. So what we're trying to kind of put in context is, improvement is not just about a process. It is about a combination, a judicious combination of improving the organizational process, enhancing the individual practice, and exploiting appropriate technologies and tools to do the practice and the processes. And therefore, now let's dissect it a little more and ask ourselves, what is it all about? To expand upon it and continue on this direction of this threefold path. One, the first thing that when we talk about a process from an organizational standpoint, the question here is, do we have a clear set of actions that is listed out so that we are consistent? We know what each one of us have to do. So we need to know whom, what is the work, by whom is it supposed to be done, and when is it supposed to be done. And that really is the essence of the organizational process, which can be heavyweight, it can be light, it can be complex, however way depending on the size and the scale and the complexity of the organization. And second, it's really about a good method for doing the action. So what is the key word here? We are saying, look, there are actions to be done. And these actions may be to a larger degree outlined by the process, which is at an organizational level, which clearly also states by whom and when. And then We say, okay, to do these actions, we need the how, and that is where a personal practice comes into play. And to implement a good personal practice, which is not necessarily limited by experience alone, we need a good method. We need some set of techniques or guidelines or heuristics which form the basis of a method/methodology to do those actions, so that I as an individual have a good personal practice. And finally, of course, these actions that we are doing, the individual actions that we are doing, that is guided in some sense by the organizational process, we want to see how can the actions be done? How can they be assisted? And that is where tools come into picture, which could be software oriented. It may not be software oriented or technology oriented. It could be. They may not be a software tool, be a non-technical. It could, as I mentioned, any of these. So look at it, and if you break it down, we outline our actions. When we talk about actions, we are saying by whom and when and how. And when we talk about the how, what can I do as a human? What can I do get better done by a tool? And what can be assistive in nature to help me do this job? Now, let's take a little more deeper look from each of these angles and see what it takes. Now, let's look at the improvement from the process aspect. Remember, process aspect was about, do I have a clear set of actions? And do I know clearly who is supposed to do and when is it supposed to be done? Now, what do we mean by actions? In the context of QA, the key actions that we do are related to a static review, are related to dynamic testing, or it may be related to a dynamic retesting. Right? Now, what do we do in each of these? Well, I may review a requirement, the code review test assets like plane and data. Or if I'm doing the act of which may involve working together as a plan, keep figuring out an automation, executing it in whatever form, plugging it into a pipeline, and then of course assessing the progress, the quality, and so on. And finally, when it comes to retest, which is not necessarily testing the new ones, it is about understanding how do I assess the impact. Which ones should I retest and which ones I need not retest. And then, of course, doing whatever is from an automation standpoint to regress this on a more continual basis so that we get some kind of health check. And of course, that's where the execution comes in. Right? So, all we are dealing with is we are saying processes are always about some actions, and we are delineating the action into the three buckets of review, the act of testing, and act of retesting. And now, when you look at the actions and say, okay, I have bucketized it into three parts, so how can I arrange it in a life cycle? And that's where a Deming wheel can be handy from an analysis and improvement standpoint. Because obviously, whatever actions that we are doing, that is the activities that we are doing, correspond to the standard Deming wheel of saying there are actions related to planning, there are actions related to doing, there are actions related to checking, and there are actions related to taking actions when there is a course correction required. And that's what the standard Deming wheel of quality is all about. So we can use the Deming wheel to analyze their current actions and then look forward to how to improve. So when it comes to the plan, it's really about, hey, is there a defined plan in terms of time, who's supposed to do, when, what, how much of estimate, any resources, people and non-people resources, so to speak, are they all available? And that's part of the planning process, right? Estimates of various things. The doing part is all about activities that are related, which related to the activities of test and retest. And all we're saying is, hey, do I have a clearly listed set of activities which allow me to do the activities of review, the activities of testing, the activities of retesting, and do they have some clear exit entry criteria? Right? Now, when it comes to the checking part, what we're really saying, okay, the various activities that I have done, is there some measure that I can use to measure the progress of activities. And remember, the activities are again related to review, testing, and retesting. Or the quality of the activities that are done, the quality of the outcome of the entire activity that is done. So when I say outcome, it is related to the application quality maybe, the process quality maybe, and the quality itself, we are talking about the quality of the product itself. Right? And lastly, when it comes to the Deming-Wheels action, okay, I am measuring, I am understanding, I am able to get a good visibility of my actions related to progress and quality and outcome. So if something is not up to the mark, am I able to make corresponding changes? Can I adjust? Does the practice and does the process allow me to take or enable me to take corrective actions quickly enough so that I can course correct and continue on? So what have we done? Just to recap a little bit, because it might be a little dense, we said, hey, we have looked at activities or actions. We have broken it down into three buckets of review, test, and retest. We have arranged it in the context of we explained about what it means in the context of a review of what, test of what, and retest of what, and then arrange the various activities in the context of the Deming wheel of plan, do, check, act. And now we have a good way of analyzing what we do in our organization of a team, and then go ahead with notions of improvement. And again, in this part is about improvement of the process. The number 2 now is about the practice. And I told you practice is individual, process is organizational. And what are we talking about here? We said that, hey, practice is about how I do individually. Now, I can do a good job individually if I'm very experienced. But if experience is the only guiding way for me to do good work, then I have to really wait a long time for me to demonstrate good work. And that's where a methodology comes in handy. Because a good methodology to review or test or retest allows me to build individual capabilities and therefore do a good job with respect to the 3 key activities of review, which could be reviewing code or assets or requirements, or it could be the testing, which could be techniques that are required to estimate, to design, to automate, to assess, or it could be with respect to retest, which is primarily focused on how do I analyze the impact? What should I retest? What do I not need to retest? And then, of course, how can I constantly enable the health measurement or health check via some kind of a continuous testing? And that is where assess health comes into picture. So is there a good method or methodology which allows me as an individual to do these 3 key buckets of activities related to review, testing, and retest very well, right? Which is in consonance with the larger organizational process that we have. And finally, here are activities that I'm doing as an individual in consonance with the practice. Now, can I enable them or accelerate the doing? And that is where tools come in. So we need support. We need good support from one, technology and tools, which may be software oriented, or it could be aids, like what I briefly mentioned earlier as checklists and guidelines and so on. And they are really more of practice aids. Some of these aids can also be converted into a software oriented or software based aid. So again, going back to the same picture, remember we had buckets of activities related to review, testing, and retest. And all we are saying is, okay, for each of these activities, is there a good tool support? And tool support is not limited, therefore, to executing test cases, right? It could be a tool that could be useful for static analysis of code to critique. There could be certain interesting, intelligent tools that might even analyze some kind of a written document, maybe in a form of a requirement, to tell you if it's, if there is any flaws or if there's any issues or if there is any questions related to the requirement. So remember here, tools we are not talking about as in terms of only automation tools in terms of execution. It could be any of these activities. So it could be tools and aids to review documents or code. It can also be tools obviously related to estimation, planning, certainly test case design, and of course, the execution, and of course, the management tools that we use more often, and the reporting tools that help us to manage things better. So tools also span across the entire life cycle, right? And tools can be therefore be put into these buckets of review, test, and retest. So when it comes to retest, I think the more important aspect from an automation is how can I make it more continuous? And today's world, we say continuous test, we say pipeline, and so on and so forth, because we want a more continual notion of test to assess health and let us know if things are not broken. And therefore, the third aspect to improvement is the support that I get from software tools or maybe practice aids. Because aids help me to do a job better. They give me an idea, they give me a basis, or they might give me some standardized way of doing things for which, because the whole idea is I do not want to waste my intellectual bandwidth redoing things that have been done well before. And if that is available as a software tool, I just take it and execute it. If it is available as an aid, then I exploit it and benefit from that. Right? So that's a third aspect to accelerating the improvement. So now, remember we started off the discussion by saying, is it just about improvement and automation? And then we dwelt upon and said we broke it into three parts. And then we also talked about the various, what do we want to accomplish? And we talked about consistency and effect and so on. So let's now take a slightly detailed picture of this. On the right side, you see these boxes, which are really attributes of improvement, right? We want it to be consistent. We want it to be effective. We want it to be... So when I say we want it, what does it mean? It's the QA system as a whole, which is a combination of all these three: process, practice, and tools. So now, what do these lines represent? When we have a good process, what we really are saying is, hey, it helps me to be consistent. It helps me to be efficient because I know clearly who is supposed to do when and how. We're not talking about the how, we only know what, and therefore we are clear, and therefore it's probably in that sense efficient. It's certainly visible. It gives us also, the process also includes certain measures, metrics, so therefore we get certain visibility into the various activities that we do. It could be progress, it could be number of test cases, it could be hours of estimation, whatever measures that you're doing, or complexity of code and so on. A process helps us to also stay certain agile, because the process will tell you, hey, if this happens, do this, etc. So it allows us to course correct and adjust, and hopefully a good process enables agility. Certainly, a well-formed process allows us to scale, to handle bigger teams, more complex projects, and so on and so forth. So as you can see, these various attributes of consistency, effectiveness listed on the right side, and the process has a significant say in all the aspects, and probably the least amount of it in the context of effectiveness. And that is where practice comes into picture. Practice is largely focused on effectiveness because it's about the actual activity being done by the individual, and that is why methodology and methods have a significant play in how we do work. But in addition to being effective, practice also has a good impact to the notion of efficiency, because I have a better capability now and therefore can make more meaningful decisions on the fly, to be doing two things: one, to be more efficient, and to be able to adjust and course correct constantly, right? So the agility is certainly a good function of not only the process, but also the individual practice. And finally, of course, when we talk about tools, tools are normally associated with performance and efficiency, which I think we have no issues with, because we know that maybe tools helps us to do things faster. But tools also help us to scale, because I can take on bigger, larger, etc. and because it's enabled by tool. And remember, tools are not limited to execution automation. So if I have a good management tool, good reporting tools, they are all terribly paramount for scalability. And because tools also give us certain dashboards and reports, especially from a management aspect, they certainly help us to become more visible, I think I'm not connected to the visibility aspect of it, and that helps us to change and course correct quickly, and that is where agility becomes important, right? So each of these aspects of process, practice, and tools have a very clear connection to some of the systemic attributes of any good system. In this case, our focus of system is a QA system. Right? Now, finally, we'll connect all these dots to say, what does it really take to accelerate improvement? We talked about improvement in the context of QA, and to justify the topic, which is about accelerating QA improvement, what does it take? Accelerating QA improvement is not about doing things faster only. It is about doing things first very well. So first we learn to do very well, so that whatever activity that we do it very well. Why? Because we want to have least amount of rework. Once we kind of in some sense get to a point where we are doing reasonably well, then it is necessary, then we get greedy to say, can I do the same thing that is doing well quickly? And then I will say, very good, I have now gone up one notch ahead, so I can do well and do quickly. Now, having gone there, I get a little more greedy. Can I do well quickly, but I do it as early as I can, so that I can probably do certain preventive piece. I don't have to kind of do some of those things later. And that is where naturally it comes into do less. And do less is a significant function of one pulling it forward, better practice aids, better tooling, and so on and so forth. And that's how it is. So think of it as is going up the pinnacle, kind of in the 4 steps, right? So first is you're focused on, am I doing well? Am I doing then quickly? Then am I doing early enough? Then I'm doing less enough. Right? And how do we connect to all the contexts that we talk about, all the topics that we talk about? I've tried to put this picture as the first one signifying the process, the first icon. Second icon is related to the practice. And third icon is related to the tools. So as you can see, a do well certainly means I have clarity of who, what, when, and then I have a good method to help me do it well. That is process aspect and the practice aspect, and because both of them are there, I would want to be as agile, because I want to be responsive, so that I can make those decisions quickly, so that I can do my job well. So doing well demands a good judicious combination of a process and the practice aspect, and all it accomplishes is consistency, effectiveness, and agility. So going up the next notch and saying, okay, I'm doing it well. What does it take to do quickly? Now I add in the notion of tools, and that is when it becomes hopefully a little more efficient and agile. I'm not saying we're less inefficient here. It just means the focus is on higher efficiency, better agility, increased agility. Then we say, okay, I am able to do a job well. I am able to also do it quickly. Then what does it take to do early? Well, it requires better visibility so that I can pull forward whatever work. It requires better efficiency because I can pull forward. Maybe I need some aspects of testability, some aspects of better review mechanisms in place for me to be more meaningful, so that I can be more efficient right in the early stage. And finally, of course, do less, which is a combination of all the three, helps us to be certainly effective, certainly efficient, and certainly be agile. And therefore, I just to do the most optimal amount of work, and therefore, I am probably getting the highest level of improvement, right? And the highest level of improvement is, if I prevent all the issues, right? Which means I really don't do any of those kind of work, which theoretically is interesting, practically may not be there. What you want to do is you want to minimize as much as possible. So that's how the aspects, the three aspects of practice, process, and tools can come in handy to connect to those various systemic attributes arranged by this, in some sense, the 4 levels of, improvement, supported by the process aspects, the methodology aspects, and the tooling aspects. And tools also includes practice aids or process aids, anything to help us do. So I hope you get the idea that, that QA improvement, speeding up and automation is probably not exactly that. It's little more than that, right? And therefore, acceleration of QA improvement or accelerating QA improvement demands one, process improvement, number two, a good practice adoption, and both of them to be enabled by appropriate tooling and appropriate aids. And that's what I wanted to share with you, more inspired by a question that I get frequently. Hey, I want to improve, I want to adopt tools, and therefore, is that good enough? And the normal answer is, it takes just more than tools and a process, right? And that's what I wanted to touch base on today. And our consulting and implementation of smart assurance practices is as a consulting and advisory product that we have, which we title as SmartQA transformation program at an enterprise level or a team level, is basically a consulting advisory solution, which is a combination of diagnostic, which means we come and do a diagnostic, do some coaching, do some deep learning, and so on. Is primarily to help organizations go through that improvement cycle. And whatever I talked about is whatever I practice as part of the transformation program at an organization level or at a team level. So that's just to kind of outline one of the offerings that we have from Stacksoft.